You know what? I didn't know much about that Jamie Donley kid before, like this preseason, you know. But he's really impressed me playing at left back, looking very good. But apparently he's like an attacking midfielder, an attacking based player. You wouldn't have guessed that. He looks so comfortable at left back. Bergvall. Now I knew Bergvall was a good player, but I thought he was going to be moulded in. He'll need a few minutes here and there. Bergvall looks fantastic for Tottenham this preseason. He has. But the standouts were Kulusevski and Son. Kulu and Son, the way they combine with each other, the IQ, the movement, how they're working together for the goals. There are two incredible players. Now, I've always said with Kulu, he's not an Ange Postecoglou winger because he's not someone that goes wide and he's not a 1v1 specialist. But Kulu is a very good winger in his own right because you know that he's a very good player. He's got the attributes, IQ, technical abilities to be a very, very good player. And maybe Kulu in this sort of false nine role where he can combine with Son and link up well, maybe it's working because whenever I've watched Tottenham this preseason, Kulu has been one of the standout players. Son was fantastic. Archie Gray, Bergvall obviously stood out. Mikey Moore when he comes off the bench, obviously good player. But look, let's talk about Tottenham because you are crazy to watch. Because I watched the first half, 3-0 up. You were brilliant, balling it out. This game could have ended like 10-5 to Tottenham. Very open. It's very classic. Tottenham is so entertaining to watch as a neutral because there's just goals. There's just goals. Very open. Your new signing, Yang, was cooking Emerson a little bit as well. But it was a really entertaining game to watch. Second half, I didn't watch as much. But you looked really vulnerable in the transition. I don't know, maybe Archie Gray coming off later on. But once Bergvall had a much better half than Maddison. Maddison wasn't out today, but I do think he's a good player. Skip wasn't particularly good. Obviously, you had the youth come through and shine. That Lankshear guy scored again. He looks good, that Lankshear guy. Donnelly looks good. Mikey Moore's been good this preseason. Your youth is really showing up your first team in preseason, and maybe that's because they've got lots to prove. They're more energetic. Ange can mould them into the players he wants. But I have to say, for the most part, Tottenham were very good in that first half. They played some very good football. And then the second half, they dropped off. But I would say there's still a lot of positives to take from that game, to take from that win. You were unbeaten in pre-season, and I think you're doing something good. So I want to start by talking about Bergvall. I want to talk about Son. I want to talk about Kulu. I want to talk about other things. But my overall review of this was Son looked really good, really sharp. I think Son is a left winger. For you, I just think Son is so much better on the left wing. I think Kulu can play central and Son can play on the left. I think Son on the left, Kulu or potentially someone else to come in on the middle, and then a long-term right winger is probably what you should be looking at. Or if you do bring in someone like an Ivan Toney, I guess you can play Brennan, Werner, Kulu, even more out of position on the right. But I just think Kulu is finding the role centrally. I think Son is better on the left for you guys. But I do think you need another attacker. I think Brennan Johnson's someone that comes off the bench and makes an impact. I think he's a good player, but I think he's someone that makes such a good impact off the bench with sort of his legs. Now, what I will take from the game is the Yang guy. He looked really, really good. I don't know if that's because he was playing against Emerson, but he looked good. Son looked good. Kulu looked good. Bergvall looked absolutely fantastic. But so we talk about Jamie Donley first. Because, he slotted in at left back and he was linking up unbelievably well with Son. Him and Son on a number of occasions doing that link up. I believe he got the assist and he did not look out of position. He looked really good going forward. He looked really comfortable and he looks like almost he's ready. Now, which sounds weird because it's only pre-season. You can't fully judge it off pre-season, but he looked very, very ready, very impressive, very mature is the way that I would say. And I think considering you had issues at left back, you've obviously got Ben Davies and Udogie. But maybe you do keep him around. Maybe you don't loan him out because you don't want to be in a position where you're playing Van de Ven at left back again as well. And Van de Ven did a job there. But I think he could have some real use for Tottenham. I think he looks incredibly versatile. Not that he's anything like Joe Gomez, but you know how Joe Gomez can play centre-back, left-back, right-back, DM for Liverpool. And, he might not necessarily start for them, but there's always so many injuries that he's playing. And when he plays, he's good and he's reliable. Obviously, this guy's young and he could potentially be even good enough to, do amazing things at Spurs and be a regular starter. But that's kind of what I see. Archie Gray was solid. I think he's had better pre-season games, but I did feel that he does help Tottenham in one area, which is defending against transitions. I think Tottenham's biggest weakness has been the midfield just gets played through, the defence gets exposed, and all of a sudden you're constantly you're just constantly conceding transition opportunities. And I felt that when Archie Gray came off, the K-League All-Stars just looked a lot more dangerous in the transition, because Archie Gray is a very intelligent player that can cut out passing lanes and can improve the rest defence. But let's talk about the midfield. Let's talk about Bergvall. I think Bergvall, Sarr, Archie Gray, I think that's the midfield everyone wanted to see. Exciting. It was all right. I do think, sometimes Bergvall and Sarr have a couple of similarities there. But the midfield in the first half, for the most part, was pretty good. And I think Bergvall was the best of the three players in the midfield. Because what you get with Bergvall, and I saw someone say this about this, and I think they're spot on, is I think he's someone that has no angle biases whatsoever. And I said this when I did my analysis of him back in January. He can receive the ball at any angle, in any position. He can play it left, he can play it right, he can play to the left, he can play to the right. Because he's got no angle biases, he's a completely unpredictable player. He can go anywhere on the pitch, he can receive the ball anywhere on the pitch, and he'll be absolutely fine. It's not like he always has to pass to the left, always have to pass to the right, For an example, completely different example, but Anthony, Manchester United. Every time he gets the ball, I can tell you what he's going to do. I can tell you that he's going to cut in on his left foot and shoot. He's so predictable. With Bergvall, you don't know what he's going to do, because he moves his body to manipulate defenders. He's got no angle biases. He can receive the ball at any angle. He can play the ball at any angle. He can play it left. He can play it right. There's no hindrance. It's technical ability. He can go both ways in every single phase of the pitch. He is comfortable in defensive phase, the midfield, the attacking phase. He can go both ways in every single phase of the pitch. He nearly got on the score sheet. It came off the underside of the crossbar. I mean, left foot, right foot, back, front, any angle, any phase, play it, build up, progression, chance creation. He's got what you want in a player. You are very lucky to get Bergvall, who had 2 trials at Manchester United and ended up in a Tottenham shirt. A player that I did extensive research on, thinking he was going to be a Man United player a couple years back, for him to be playing for Tottenham and balling it out in pre-season. But my man of the match would have to be between Kulu and Son. It will obviously be Son, but I want to talk about Kulu because he's picked up this new role in pre-season for Tottenham as a sort of false 9. Now, one thing about Kulu is he's a very, very good player. Now, I know he didn't have necessarily the best season last year, but I think when he played his best football, it was more in that set 10 central position when Maddison was injured rather than on the wing under Ange. Kulu, we saw from Tottenham's first season, is an unbelievable player. And in terms of raw ability, in terms of ceiling, Kulu is one of the best players you actually have at Tottenham Hotspur, but he's not an Ange Postecoglou winger. He's not got that pace to go outside to take men on. And he thrives more in central areas. And I think Ange has figured that out. So Ange has now started playing Kulu as in this sort of false 9 position where he's got 4 goal involvements in 4 consecutive games, and he was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. He had the striker's instinct for the goal. He was linking up with Son really well. His movement to draw defenders out and create space won't be spoken about. He did that well. His movement to drop deep and link, and he was unpredictable. He can drift wide and he can drift central, and him and Son can rotate because they're versatile players. And it created all these really good dynamics where they were interchanging. Kulu comes wider, Son comes central. Rise that unpredictability, draws defenders out of positions, opens up space, easier for Spurs to break down those blocks. I thought him and Son interchanging was allowing Tottenham to create more chances. I thought the linking play was really good. And while I still think that, is it too early to say after a few pre-season games that he can play the number 9 and maybe Tottenham still should look at Ivan Toney? He's definitely working well there. Lankshear, Kulu, Richarlison, if he's actually fit and in form, you do actually have some good options there. I think, for me, Son is a left winger and it's the right wing position where Brennan Johnson is great, but should he be better coming off the bench? A Pedro Neto to that right wing, if he could stay fit, would be absolutely fantastic for you guys. But it worked really well. And it reminds me a little bit, and you're not going to like this, but let me explain it, of Sancho last pre-season. Now, Jadon Sancho, we don't really talk about last season, but everyone knows Jadon Sancho is an incredibly talented player. And his come to United didn't work. Sancho was one of the most highly rated prospects. He came to United, didn't work. He got ridiculous numbers in the Bundesliga. Went back to Dortmund, was quite good. But Jadon Sancho was never a Man United kind of winger because Man United need fast wingers. It's a transitional approach, whereas Jadon Sancho is someone that thrives in the half space, more similar profile to Kulu. Now, last pre-season, Jadon Sancho was our best player. He was our best player last preseason. He was brilliant. He was playing an essential role because obviously Martial couldn't stay fit, and we were signing this inexperienced number 9 in Højlund, and then the board said, yeah, you can't get an experienced number 9, and we can't just rely on this, this 19, 20-year-old kid Højlund to lead the line. So he was training Sancho up to play century in his false 9 position last year. And Sancho was absolutely phenomenal. And then he goes and plays Rashford out of position at striker and Anthony on the right wing and puts Sancho on the bench, does it for 3-4 games in a row, and Sancho's like, I've had enough. And Sancho acted like a child, but it was weird. Sancho was so good in that false 9 position, and then Nintendo just never played him there, and never played him at all, actually, and then he just had that strop, and then he left. But he reminds me of Kulu in that sense of he wasn't a winger at United. Sancho's not a Manchester United winger. Kulu's not an Ange Postecoglou winger. But because they're so technically good and so good in the half space, they have the abilities to actually play as a false nine kind of player. Obviously, Kulu, I don't expect him to have a sulk like Sancho and refuse to play under Ange Postecoglou if he gets benched the first few games of the season. But you can see, elements of why Kulu would do well in that role and why he would thrive. And I think although it is a friendly, the interchanges and movement was really good because it was drawing out players. But lastly, let's just talk about Son. Son is Son. Son is a good player. Son is a great player. He has good days. He has bad days, but there's no denying the incredible quality of Son. Input, running, the second goal or Son's first goal, that's pure Son. Get it on the left-hand side, drive at players, find a space, bash it in. That is Son. Get the ball, dribble, cut and shoot, running behind, transition, pace. That is Son. Son was good last season, but I still think he's a left winger, not centre forward. I think Son on the left, with more challenging on the left, that's really good with, depth there. You've got Brennan and Werner that can play on the right and Kulu that can play on the right, but I don't think that place is sold. Pedro Neto put in there. Kulu, Lankshear, Richarlison could play central. Son, if worse comes to worse. I definitely think you need a signing in attack. 100%. 100%. I think that should be your next signing. You could put some questions in the midfield, but I do think Archie Gray, Bergvall, there's some really good talent there. Saad is good talent there. I think obviously Benson because he's a good player, Maddison's a good player. It just depends about form and probably the balance of your midfield, because I think a lot of your issues still come from conceding transitional things on the midfield, which again is down to structure. Romero van der Ven is obviously solid. Dragusin will probably play more because of Europa League and he's a solid player. I thought Porro was good. Udogi's obviously a solid player. And then you've got Archie Gray that can play at right back if needed. You could even play this Donley guy at left back if needed. It'll be interesting to see what you do there. But for the most part, I thought Tottenham were good. I didn't watch loads of the second half. It was a bit sloppy in midfield after you changed the midfields. But I thought the young players were super impressive. I think Tottenham are unbeaten in pre-season. They've looked good. And if I was a Tottenham fan, I'd be quite happy with what I've seen in pre-season.